Alan Wake 2 is the most ambitious game that Remedy has ever made. It took over 13 years in pre-production, negotiation and development to bring Alan Wake 2 to life. Unfortunately, despite how great of a game it is, Alan Wake 2 story is far from finished. Imagine one day you set yourself a big goal. For example, let's say writing a book. You have an idea how your story should start and how it should end. You start writing it, every day you produce a sizable amount of pages and you feel that you're making a solid progress. Everything seems fine, but then the progress starts to slow down. The days turn into weeks, from weeks they move to months, and the perfect ending that you planned for your masterpiece seems further and further away. It feels like it's slipping away from you. And it doesn't make sense unless you change a few things in the previous pages. You revisit the beginning of your novel, you start to make tweaks and changes, then you realize that with a new beginning you need to change something in the middle, then again something in the beginning, and like that it goes on and on. The cycle keeps repeating for years, and the more you try to get the book to match your original perfect vision that you had in the beginning, the further away it gets from completion. This is the nature of perfectionism. Striving to create a masterpiece can trap you in an endless cycle hindering completion. If Alan Wake 1 was about Alan's writer's block and his struggle to find what to write next, Alan Wake 2 is about Alan getting stuck in his writer's perfectionism that doesn't let him break free from the dark place where he's been trapped for the last 13 years. Moreover, Alan's journey to escape may serve as a reflection of Remedy's challenging journey in completion of Alan Wake 2.
When Wake ends up in the dark place, getting out from there is going to be a long, hellish journey and a hard struggle. And I guess that where we are now is fiction becoming reality.
After the original Alan Wake in 2010, Remedy wanted to start the development of the sequel right away. The first game was initially designed with a sequel in mind. They developed a prototype for the sequel and they showed it to Microsoft, the publisher of the first game, and they received a polite no for making the sequel.
The next big game from Remedy won't be Alan Wake 2.
The reason was that Microsoft wanted a new IP that will be fully owned by Microsoft. However, Remedy couldn't simply start developing a new game on their own. They didn't have the publishing rights. Despite holding all the intellectual property for Alan Wake, they found themselves in a peculiar situation when they owned the game but couldn't proceed without Microsoft's approval. It was a long journey to restore the full rights for Alan Wake. They had to pivot and release 2 games in between. Quantum Break, also published by Microsoft, and Control, published by 505 Games. For a long time it seemed like Remedy would never be able to make Alan Wake 2.
This time around we wanted the story to focus on introducing this interesting, cool world.
Remedy developed the concept of Remedy's connected universe, which essentially means that most of Remedy's games occur in the same universe and are interconnected. I will say that all of them are connected, even if that's not officially confirmed and they stated that Quantum Break is not part of it, I still believe it is. The most impressive proof of Remedy's continuous work on Alan Wake is that despite not having the publishing rights, Remedy included a trailer for it inside Quantum Break.
It's not a lake, it's an ocean.
It's amazing to see how close it is to the actual game. It seems that the script and story have been ready for a while. The main change is obviously Saga's cast, but it's clear that they had been ready to make this game for a long time. It is actually very close to the game that we're playing now, and this trailer is from 2016, which means that the foundation of Alan Wake's 2 story was ready at least since then. By the way, this is the only game that Remedy official states is not in the Remedy's connected universe. Remedy was able to purchase the publishing rights from Microsoft in July in 2019 for a one-time payment of 3.5 million euros. Just a month later they began the development of Alan Wake 2 with funding from Epic's publishing. The total budget of the game was 70 million euros, which is considered to be the most expensive cultural products ever made in Finland.
Suomi, Finland. Pulla, Karjalan piirakka.
Alan Wake is a famous writer known for his crime thriller novels about a New York detective Alex Casey. He's been missing for 13 years since his getaway trip to Bright Falls. The game starts with Alan. Hold on, that's not Alan. The game starts with a naked man in the woods. You as a player are back in Bright Falls following the story of... Never mind, let's try again. The game starts with Saga Anderson. Saga Anderson is an FBI detective. She arrives to Bright Falls to investigate a series of murders related to Cult of the Tree. Her investigation starts at the murder scene of Robert Nightingale, the big naked guy whose murder we got to witness. Her partner is Sam Lake himself, starring as Agent Alex Casey. Alex Casey is also the famous character from Alan Wake's novels. Things start to slowly get stranger when Saga passes by the Oh Dear diner and is recognized by the waitress Rose Marigold.
I thought we'd never see you back here after that awful thing happened to your baby girl.
Rose asks if she has known Saga for a long time and mentions an accident, and that accident took Saga's daughter alive. And Saga has no recollection of whoever Rose is.
She drowned. Your daughter.
Basically, Rose stays dead. Saga's daughter is dead, despite us witnessing a phone call with her daughter in the beginning title sequence.
I'm good, Mom. How are you?
Back in the morgue, they find inside the body a page from Alan's manuscript describing future events. As soon as Alan's manuscript is mentioned, a local sheriff, Tim Breaker, recognizes the manuscript. These pages are Alan Wake's work. He says that he collected many of his pages and as soon as he brings them, he disappears. And the dead body of Nightingale rises.
Vanished.
Now, with the missing body on the loose, they decide to head back to the woods to pursue Nightingale, which leads them into an overlap. Overlaps are essentially areas where reality and the other dimension known as Dark Place collide, forming their own small dimensional pockets that resemble both our world and the Dark Place. To enter them, a ritual must be performed. The first ritual is inside a tree where the first manuscript page is discovered. To enter through it, Saga needs Nightingale's missing heart. The overlap has a loop-like structure, though it's not precisely loop. Typically it requires repeating the same path 3 times, and once completed you reach your endpoint, the location where the Dark Place connects with the normal world. This is where all boss fights in the game will occur. After crossing the first overlap, we encounter the first boss of the game. I had quite a rough time when I played this fight for the first time, as I accidentally skipped the shotgun and I arrived at the fight with 0 bullets, which was probably not a great start, but fortunately after quite a few tries and failures, he becomes fairly manageable, as long as you keep your distance and keep on consistently searching around for ammo.
What's your name?
My name is Alan Wake. I'm a writer. I've been...
Wake? Where did you come from? You've been missing for 13 years.
13.
Finally, after 13 long years, Alan emerges from the lake. This was the moment that I had been waiting for a while since I installed the game. Even though Saga is an interesting character, the game is called Alan Wake, and Alan is the central character that we bought this game for. And Remedy took its time to have this reveal. I counted that before we have a chance to play as Alan, it will take on average 2.5 hours. I love that slow beginning, at the first playthrough. On the second one, not so much. After playing the previous Remedy's game and finally getting Alan out of the darkness, I have to say, I was really invested in Alan's story. I have a feeling that Alan's been probably the longest suffering lead character in gaming that comes to my mind.
For the past 13 years, you've been trapped in a nightmare dimension called the Dark Place.
Yeah.
It's like New York, but it's not New York. And can be reached from the bottom of Cauldron Lake, but it's not really under the lake. And after all this time, you've managed to get out.
Yeah.
But so has your evil doppelganger. Mr. Scratch, Or is it the dark presence?
Alan is scared that with him, the darkness got out. This time, darkness is wearing Alan's face. Similar how in the first game, the darkness presented itself as Barbara. In the sequel, the darkness is presented as his evil doppelganger, Scratch. I always found it surprisingly how calmly Saga and Casey take everything that Alan says. From now on, the game is split between two protagonists, Saga and Alan. Whenever we switch to Alan, we get transported to the dark place. The attic is exactly the same place where he is trapped since the first game. The story that Alan writes is what comes to reality in the darkness, and he can also affect real living beings in the outside world. For 14 years, Alan has been trying to escape. To escape the dark place, Alan must write a story that includes his own escape. However, there is a catch. It must be a horror story. The story has undergone so many rewrites and meddling from the darkness itself that Alan is struggling to concentrate.
Let me sleep. I'm so tired. I write. There's nothing left. It's all gone.
His memory is fuzzy, he doesn't remember his previous drafts, and his thoughts are far from clear. In this condition, finishing his book proves to be extremely hard. Alan's journey is to go through his story and finish the book with an ending that will set him free. Unfortunately, he pulls innocent people into the horror story. One of them is Saga. Saga, on the other hand, is supposed to be in the real world, but as we go through her investigation and try to figure out the details about what is going on, she gets trapped by the darkness as well. Not in the dark place yet, but she's already part of the horror story written by Alan and manipulated by the darkness. We still don't really know exactly what the darkness is, only that it's some sort of paranormal force that lives in the dark place. And if it escapes, nothing good will come of it. Saga is not the only one who gets pulled in. The whole Bright Falls, Alex, much everyone in Bright Falls are inside Alan's story. We will also find out more how Alan's power works, as we never got a proper explanation in the first game, but here we finally get one. Alan's powers don't create a world out of nothing. They guide existing events and real people into real-life nightmares that are meant to be a work of fiction. As the game progresses, Saga will be guided by Alan. The further she'll get into, the more she'll get dragged into the darkness, and the further she'll be at risk of losing her daughter.
It's not true. It's just a fucking story. It's not true. Logan's back home. She's fine.
The whole journey with Saga feels like a slow transition from the normal world to becoming a nightmare. The moment she arrives in Bright Falls, she becomes part of the horror story. The whole town seems to know her and believe that her daughter is dead. Alan believes that Scratch is the one behind Saga's daughter's death in the story. He must be stopped. Otherwise, the horror story will spread outside of Bright Falls, as well as Saga's daughter's death will become true. They must find Alan's clicker before Scratch gets his hands on it to change the story. The clicker is an amplifier that makes whatever is written true. The issue is, the clicker appears to be in the hands of the murderous cult of the tree that killed Nightingale. The game has much more freedom and exploration than the first Alan Wake. Don't get me wrong. It's still a very linear story. In most locations you are allowed to roam freely with Saga. You can return to the previously explored areas in case you forgot any items. Similarly, in Alan Wake's chapters he also has this New York central square from where he can go to different areas, and he goes throughout his chapters. The main difference between the sequel and the first game is that I didn't find Alan Wake 1 game scary whatsoever. It was a fairly straight and narrow path that was easy to follow. Saga, on the other hand, I found Saga's chapters much scarier than Alan's. Alan's event already happened, so I knew that he will manage no matter what, but Saga's, her death just felt more permanent. The sense of realism of what is happening, the sound effects, the bushes, the constant anticipation of getting attacked kept me on my toes throughout Saga's chapters.
Hello? Anyone here?
The Mindplace. My version of the Mind Palace technique. To sift through clues and work the case.
The Mindplace is where Saga works on the cases. You can access it anytime throughout the game, however, if you're attacked while there, you will receive damage. The Mindplace consists of a board, desk, and profiling options. Overall, it's a cool and nice minigame that gives us some exposition through Saga's eyes. At the beginning, I really enjoyed it and thought it was great, collecting all the clues, placing them together, it was fun. For some time. I personally found that the Mindplace was a great concept, however sometimes I caught myself just clicking on objects mindlessly to be more efficient instead of thoughtfully engaging with it. I know that's not the way it's supposed to be played, but after some time on the board it just becomes annoying to deal with. It gets repetitive quite fast. I felt that quite often, more than enhancing the story, it was actually breaking the action pace. Sometimes I just wanted to keep moving further into the woods without having to stop for board item placement. It broke the game's tension many times, and that probably was something that I would consider to be bad for a survival horror. As well as when I was doing my second playthrough, I really didn't enjoy the board mechanic. It felt tedious doing it for a second time. What I love though is that the Mindplace gets more complex as the story progresses closer to the end. At the beginning it's just a room to sort out Saga's thoughts, but as the game goes on we find out that it's much more complex than it looks, and Saga is not as a simple detective as we think. Saga is a great character to introduce the players to the Remedyverse. Similar to a player who is newcomer to the Remedyverse, she's experienced the nightmare itself for the first time. Her objective is clear: save her daughter and finish the case. For a good part of the game, I believe that Remedy will portray Saga as a cold, stoic character without much depth until the end. Well, I'm glad I was wrong. Indeed, she felt like that for the most part of the game, until the end when everything starts to fall apart.
Logan, Casey, myself. This is my fault. My daughter is dead.
This is the most crucial moment when she's in her mental space, confronting all of her insecurities. She tries to stay strong, but deep inside, she blames herself for putting her daughter in danger. Additionally, it's interesting that in comparison with Alan, she only has one live-acted scene.
I needed someone in the story to fight the darkness. Saga Anderson. I kept seeing her in my visions. She was already in Bright Falls, already involved, but she was not in return. Not yet. I'd write her in. Try to stop Scratch within the limits of the horror story.
Most of Alan's chapters unfold within the dark place, a twisted reflection of New York City. Similar to Saga, with her Mindplace, Alan has its own mental realm, the attic with the typewriter, the one that we've seen in the first game. He is trapped in there, and for 13 years he's been trying to write his novel as a way to escape the dark place. In contrast to Saga's investigative focus, Alan's narrative centers on assembling plot scenes to reshape his novel. Progressing through his chapters, he uncovers inspirations, moments where he glimpses Alex Casey, the fictional character from his books, recounting murder cases. These instances are linked to his literary work on Alex Casey's thrillers and events contained within them. On the contrary to Saga's Mindplace, Alan's writing board feels more focused. It involves just a few short clicks without the need for extensive minigames. The fictional cases serves as the glue that holds together Alan's novel story. Alan's work as a writer is based on his previous character. One of the most impressive aspects of Alan's journey through the dark place is the art design and overall attention to detail. Every single sign contains a subliminal message from the darkness to Alan, or perhaps it's a reflection of Alan's insecurities. Even seemingly ordinary signs and advertisements carry messages related to Alan's writing, serving as warnings from the dark place to stop. A warning: you should not write. The dark place exploits all the fears and insecurities of its victims, feeding on their creativity and light, twisting them into manifestations of their own fears. Despite the beautiful and terrifying art direction, I never experienced a sense of dread, anxiety, and fear similar to Saga's chapters. When I felt that all the chapters inside of the dark place, they are something that already happened, even when Alan dies. There is always this feeling that he's got another chance no matter what. Despite that, his chapters are very entertaining. Also, as I mentioned before, his mind, let's say it's not the clearest. He's stuck in a never-ending cat and mouse chase with the darkness. And whenever he gets too close to getting out, it wipes out his memory, so he has to start his story once again from the beginning. He often loses his memory and track of where he is within his story, which makes it extremely hard to write his book.
A sense of déjà vu washed over me. Had I had this conversation before?
Alan.
Even though Alan's chapters felt like a flashback where everything was already decided before getting into Saga's story, I was still very excited to play them. The Dark Place was a very interesting place to explore, and I'm glad that we finally got to see what's on the other side of Cauldron Lake.
Sandworm at the bottom of an ocean. It's not an ocean. And a lake. That's not a lake.
Finding out what happened with Alice during these 13 years was great. Remedy really stepped up with her storyline from the first game. If you remember the first Alan Wake, Alex's character was pretty much limited to a few scenes at the beginning and the end, lacking any depth whatsoever. Her character was simply used as a straightforward motivation to push Alan and the player to try to save her, without much emotional build-up. It was effective for the time, but it was presented in a blunt and simpler manner. However, in Alan Wake 2, her story is told through real-life recorded videotapes. Alice is portrayed by Christina Cole, and her acting performance is great. It is the emotional theme of the game, as Alice is out in the normal world recording tapes about her missing husband from 14 years ago. All Alan can do is watch with desperation and look for ways to escape, while his beloved believes that he's dead. And not just that, she believes that he's the one who is haunting and tormenting her in her nightmares.
I know it can be an awkward question with the man sitting right next to you, but I mean, how do you feel about him in the role of Casey? Does he look the part to you?
He looks exactly like I always imagined Casey to be. It's uncanny.
Saga's partner, Alex Casey, is portrayed by Sam Lake, Remedy's creative director. We encounter Casey in both Saga's and Alan's chapters. The main distinction is that in Alan's chapters, he is a manifestation of the character that Alan wrote in his books. In The Dark Place, we see Casey when Alan finds inspiration to rewrite the scene.
Turns out the cultists weren't the only ones using the tunnels.
In Saga's chapters, however, he is a real person. Similar to Saga, his life has been drawn into Alan's stories, since Alan's first book in the Alex Casey thriller series. Not directly, but rather through Alan's character's fame, conflicts at work, and strange cryptic threats from copycat killers inspired by Alan's story. Alex Casey is a different person from the one in Alan's world, despite being the inspiration for the character in The Dark Place. And he feels like he's been watched for many years, as if somebody been following him for a long time. This suggests that what Alan perceives as inspiration may actually be visions of real people, and whenever he writes about them, he unknowingly draws them into the horror story.
The janitor was a bit out there, but still a friendly face.
Ahti from Control is also there in The Dark Place with Alan. He's present not just only in The Dark Place, he's also there in the normal world. We meet him for the first time in Control, where his job is to be the janitor of the oldest house, the building that stores a lot of paranormal entities and objects. Essentially, he's in charge of all paranormal dirt that emerges from there. In Alan Wake 2, his role is not that clear, but I assume it has to be of a similar nature, maintaining the balance between darkness and light. I think Ahti's presence in Alan Wake 2 confirms my theory of him being a paranatural being, a Finnish sea god, and that's why we see him both in The Dark Place and in the real world. He can enter and leave the dark place as he pleases.
What water brings, it takes away.
In this temple of shadow and mist.
It was nice to finally get to see Thomas Zane without his diving suit. Thomas Zane is the poor filmmaker or poet that's been trapped in the dark place for much longer than Alan. He is the one who helped Alan get the clicker in the first game. If I found him in the previous game to be a very well composed, wise and clever survivor in The Dark Place, then in Alan Wake 2 he seemed not consistent with the previous game. He feels like a chaotic mess rather than the wise Zane that was presented in the first game, which I found strange and makes me think that his story is far from over. I still think Zane's storyline is somewhere in the works, and either Remedy lost a bit their way with him, maybe perhaps they're preparing a big reveal in Control 2 or Alan Wake 2 DLC, I don't know, but something is off with him. In the final draft version of the game we can find him with Dr. Darling, so I assume we'll see him in Control 2.
They're all yours. If anyone asks, you were never here.
We've all been dying to know what "it's not a lake, it's an ocean" really means.
You and me both.
The new big cast member of Alan's Adventures is Mr. Door. I think it has been the most successful addition to Alan Wake's game cast. Performed by David Harwood, he does a great job. As is classic for Remedy's games, we don't know who he is or what he does, but we get a few clues. From what I gathered, he is another paranatural being, has some sort of power similar to Ahti or the Dark Place itself. Apparently he cares about Saga, considering the whole theme of all gods of Asgard with Nordic names like Thor and Odin. If Saga's mother name is Freya, that means he's Freya's husband Odin? Does it mean that he's Saga's father? Perhaps Mr. Thor is also another paranormal godlike figure? I don't know, but just the idea that I can build up such theories makes the game feel so much deeper. He also seems to be connected to the disappearance of Sheriff Tim Breaker. Overall, he's a very cool character with a lot of charisma. I have no idea what his purpose is, only that all his appearances were great and I really enjoyed all the scenes with him.
Whatever you say.
I think it's brilliant how Remedy switches back and forth between 3D figures, gameplay, and real-life actors. I felt that Remedy struck a good balance between cinematics and gameplay. Even though the game is very cinematic, it's still a game first. I love that Alan Wake 2 uses full motion video instead of motion capture. I think I prefer watching real-life actors performing and deliver dialogues instead of hyper-realistic graphics trying to do the same. Even though Alan Wake 2 has one of the best graphical presentations this current generation, actors Vic Cavilli with Matthew Potter did a great job portraying Alan. Matthew Potter is Mr. Darling from Control and Alan Wake's voice, and Vic Cavilli is his appearance. It feels like someone at Remedy said, why motion capture when we can just film real actors? Really enjoy that approach, it feels fresh and new. They do go next level with it. It goes to the extent that you can even see in the game a 15-minute short film starring Ahti, played by Marty Suosalo, and Alex Casey, played by Sam Lake. Yes, it's an artsy movie, but you can clearly see that Remedy put their heart into it. It's not just a few clips chopped and cut together, it's a full-fledged short film that could easily be showcased in an indie film festival. And that's impressive to have such a commitment to detail in this game.
This is not the ending I wanted.
Alan Wake 2 draws inspiration and techniques from movies. This is a subject that could be discussed for hours due to the multitude of motifs and image systems used. Remedy put a lot of effort into it, and you can spot many links and messages that may not be as noticeable if you're not looking for them. It might be worth a whole separate video, as there is a lot to cover there. So I just want to share one pattern that I noticed on my second playthrough so you can get a feel on the amount of attention to detail that Remedy has put into it. So the one that I want to talk about is the deer pattern. Throughout Alan Wake 2, we see a repeated motif of a deer. There is a deer fest, deer heads, and the cult of the tree with deer-headed masks. Saga's Mindplace also has a deer behind her. Even Bright Falls diner name is Oh Deer. This repetition of an image or theme on film theory is called image system. The point of it is to repeat an image or motif that we as an audience might not be consciously aware of, but we're still observing. The idea behind this technique is that the repetition of an image or another artistic motif will bypass the judgmental part of the brain and get straight into the part that feels. And I came to the conclusion that the deer is the symbol of the Deer Fest, the festival in Bright Falls, and repeatedly seeing the deer makes us feel that we are in Bright Falls no matter where we go, even inside the Mindplace. There are many more, such as Ahti by himself and the repeated motif of water, the overlap, the loop and the spiral, and it's possible to go on and on about it, but I bet if you play this game you probably notice some strange repeated patterns. Remedy did something very special for Alan Wake 2. This time they decided all music will be related to Alan Wake 2's story. Remedy's partnered up with a local Finnish artist to take part in creating Alan Wake's soundtrack.
The only rule that we had was the lyrics need to be about the story.
Sam Lake even provided starting points for lyrics for artists, which he is even credited under each song as lyricist as well. Every single song enhances the game's story. Just as example, this one.
It's not your story to write. Scratch out your words in the night. When the writer is in doubt, my turn to come out.
I'm lost.
Every single word is related to Scratch, the game's antagonist and Alan's evil doppelganger. The song is structured as a dialogue between both of them. And I love how Remedy went above and beyond to create this wholesome experience. It's the first time they did something on this scale.
I need the old gods of Asgard.
I need a very special song.
The Old Gods of Asgard is a metal band portrayed by Poets of the Fall. They've been present in all previous Remedy's games. They are also characters in the game, part of Saga's family.
I am your great uncle Odin, and this is your long-lost Murfar, Thor.
Thor and Odin most likely are paranatural beings as well. They've been present both in Alan Wake and Control. I love how they keep coming back in each Remedy title and how they break the seriousness of the narrative with some heavy metal and wild action sequences. In Control, Remedy created a rhythmic music level featuring them. That was an important story and action plot in the game, but Remedy this time wanted to go even further. They created a chapter called We Sing, featuring the Herald of Darkness by Old Gods of Asgard and Alan Wake himself.
Such a dark place, am I trapped in here? Is this real? I cannot remember.
Basically, We Sing is a chapter where the Old Gods of Asgard sing a recap of Alan Wake's events from the previous game. It all happens while you're fighting the Taken, and on the screens Alan, Mr. Door and Sam Lake are all performing this musical. It's not something you typically see in a survival horror game, but it's what makes this game so unique and special. If you haven't played Alan Wake 2 and you're not sure if it's worth it, I will say that it is worth it just for this chapter.
Champion of light, herald of darkness.
Cut through the darkness.
Alan Wake 2 gameplay is a significant departure from both Alan Wake 1 and Control. The previous games in the series were third-person action shooters. Gameplay-wise, Alan Wake 1 reminded me mostly of GTA-type gunplay, while Control stepped out from it, made the gameplay pretty much its own thing with the throwable objects and Metroidvania-level design. Alan Wake 2 is very different from them both. With Alan Wake 2, I believe they took inspiration from Resident Evil series. After recently playing Resident Evil 4, I felt that Alan Wake hasn't strayed too far from it gameplay-wise. The game is still unique and different, but the skeleton and the bare bones on which everything is built is a Resident Evil-like survival horror gameplay. And it's not bad, it's just different from previous games and it takes some time to get used to. And I do believe it fits more the story. It features a third-person camera, heavy character movements, and as traditional to genre, you need to manage your resources. Alan Wake 2 still maintains its unique use of lighting to defeat enemies. To kill the Taken, you need to first flash them and then you can shoot. I think the gameplay change was a good call. In the first game, I felt that the gameplay didn't feel right, as it was too action-packed for a supposed to be horror game. The combat in Alan Wake 2 feels much better for a horror story. The gameplay is impactful and the animations of lighting and bullet impact feels heavy and satisfying. Additionally, character movement is now more fluid and realistic, making the gameplay overall feel much tenser in comparison to the first game. The story and gameplay in Alan Wake 2 feel more in sync than in the first game. It does a good job of keeping you uncomfortable enough to relate to what Alan and Saga are going through. The only aspect I'm not entirely sure was the right call was the inclusion of the jump scares. They felt forced and unnecessary, since neither Alan nor Saga reacts to them. It seemed like a cheap trick to make the player uncomfortable without having a narrative impact on the characters. What I don't like is the saving system. To save the game, you need to find a safe zone, an illuminated room with a blue coffee thermos inside. Countless times, I've unlocked stashes, spent a sizable amount of time with Saga solving cases in her Mindplace, or found some items, only to die before reaching next save point, and unfortunately I had to redo it all. It will be better if the game will at least track plot and board progression despite the save spots. Even though the game favors this heavy survival horror gameplay most of the time, I'm glad that there are chapters where you can just blast off and go all guns blazing. Alan Wake 2 is a fairly challenging game. There are 3 difficulty options: Story, Normal and Hard. The name speaks for themselves, however, I felt that the difficulty never quite felt right. If I played on Normal, it was okay until I got to the bosses, where the difficult fight will be a little bit too much. On Story difficulty everything was too easy. Oddly enough, I didn't feel that Hard was much harder than Normal. I never felt that I got the proper difficulty balance. Most difficult spikes happen during boss fights, and quite often I felt that the fights with them were too long, bordering on becoming tiresome. I still want to give Remedies a nod for improving the Machines control. The best part of each boss was the build up to every single. For example, before Nightingale, we have a long investigation, and that's what makes the fight special. It feels as a proper conclusion to the chapter. The same happens with every single boss further on. Before any fight, there will be a proper build up to which defeating the enemy feels satisfactory.
This story will eat us alive. This story is a monster, and monsters wear many faces.
Alan Wake 2 is a very ambitious story, and it's a well-told one. As I mentioned before, Remedy almost never gives us enough answers to provide concrete answers to our question, but it does leave us always in this kind of stages. I don't fully get it, but I think it works. At the moment the game starts, we see Alan with a light on his forehead. For 13 years he relentlessly struggles to break free from the dark place, trapped in an endless cycle. Each attempt ends in a failure, with Alan forced to restart the story, often without recollection of any previous events. In every iteration, Alan's efforts to escape are crushed, eventually leading to the dark presence gaining control over him. This results in Alan being split into 2 personas, himself and Scratch, simultaneously. Ultimately, Alan comes to the realization that his repeated attempts to escape are what created the evil within him. In Alan Wake 2, we experience his almost successful attempt to escape the dark place. To escape, he had to bring in Saga to Bright Falls and risk her daughter's life. It is debatable whether this was intentional or if Scratch changed the story to hurt Logan, but despite this, Alan manages to get out. Unfortunately, he's not the only one who got out.
He got out with my face! Scratch!
To defeat Scratch and change the horror story, Saga and Alan together rewrite the horror story that is taking over in a way that saves everyone. But according to the laws of the horror story, there must be a balance between light and darkness, and in this case, they must sacrifice the hero. Alan, once a fairly selfish and wealthy writer, makes his ultimate sacrifice for the world, and to redeem himself from all his mistakes, including dragging Logan and Saga into this mess, he allows Scratch to possess him, and Saga shoots him with a bullet of light. The worst part is in the first ending, they don't give a clear answer if Saga manages to save her daughter. They just leave it all on a phone call without an answer, while we see Alan with the same image at the beginning of a light on his forehead. Alan appears to be dead, however, after the final credits, Alan rises and announces in the fashion of the first game.
It's not a loop. It's a spiral.
And that's where the game ends. Despite Ali's tape after the credits, there is no epilogue or anything whatsoever. The ending is awfully abrupt, feels like nothing happened at the end of the day. If you think about it, what's the point? Alan is back in the dark place and we still don't know if Saga got her kid back, even though it's implied that she did. Basically, the ending doesn't resolve anything. Compared to the first game, it's a big step back.
It's not a lake. It's an ocean.
The first game was widely criticized for this ending, but there was a sense of completion, an epilogue where we saw how it all ended. Unfortunately, here there is nothing of the sort. Somewhere after the release, Remedy issued a patch called the Final Draft. The patch introduced a new game plus, which is a great addition. The main purpose of this new gameplay mode is to reach the final ending. I played it for the second time and I have mixed feelings about it. If you finish the first playthrough, you probably don't want to immediately repeat the entire adventure for the true ending. First and foremost, it's not fun to repeat Saga's board sequences related to the case. Additionally, on the second playthrough, going through a slow, long walking beginning when you're already aware how the story events unfold feels quite tedious. I wish there would be a way to have a faster version of the first 2 chapters without having to replay them from the beginning. That will be a nice life quality improvement for New Game Plus, as they do feel very slow when you're playing them for the second time.
Back to the beginning, with the memory of the past loop already fading fast. But while it lingers, I know there's hope.
In my experience, there is not more than 20 minutes of different content. There are a few nice things that might be noticeable, like the scene with Dr. Darling and Zane. We also at the end finally get the confirmation that Saga's daughter is fine. In the final draft, the ending appears to show that Alan gets out of the dark place. However, he's not exactly the same as he was before.
The master of two worlds. No. The master of many worlds.
He seems to be a supernatural being with the power to connect to many alternate worlds. Even though he is out, it appears that we are now back to the status quo of the first game. In the first game, Alice was taken by the darkness, and Alan sacrificed himself to save her. This time, it was in reverse. It looks like Alice sacrificed herself to get Alan out. As a player, it made me feel like my achievements in completing the game were diminished by events that happened off-screen. So I guess we're back to saving Alice as it was in the first game. I still wish there would be more to this ending, at least to see how different Alan is now from the first game, as it felt a bit like we are back at the beginning in a new loop.
It's not a lake. It's an ocean.
It's not a loop. It's a spiral.
It's not an ending, it's a cliffhanger, and that just leaves me with a bitter feeling that probably this story will never end. It feels like with Alan Wake, Remedy has been trying to cover so much, and it's all very entertaining and interesting, but will they be able to give him a proper ending in the next installment? Do I feel okay that the third installment might not come anytime soon? I don't know if I feel that positive about that.
Are you okay there, my friend? You look like you've been cooped up in the writer's room for a few too many years.
This is exactly how I feel.
I hope there will still be some sort of epilogue in the DLCs, but I just don't like that the story doesn't feel finished. It's abrupt and unfinished, and not in a good way.
This is how we win. Is it too easy? What if this is still the dark place, another dream to wake up from, always coming back to the beginning?
Someone's created a fucked up fantasy about us.
Hey, hold
Remember the missing sheriff from the beginning in the morgue? Team Breaker. I have no clue why this poor guy is in the dark place and why he is still there. It was the weirdest thing in the game that I didn't get an explanation for. If you have any theories and thoughts, please do let me know. Also, doesn't he look suspiciously similar to the protagonist of Quantum Break?
Are we all in your story, Alan?
Overall, Alan Wake 2 was a very positive experience with a few drawbacks. The negatives, I will say, are the saving system, abrupt ending, Saga's board minigame, slow beginning without much action, and maybe also that we have to repeat the slow beginning in the New Game Plus. However, despite these few negatives, the game's presentation, actors' performances, and story are worth a try just to see the immense amount of love and care that developers put into this project. Alan Wake 2 is a very important game. It's still the most expensive cultural project that ever came out of Finland. And I believe they did a great job representing their culture. Just the fact that I learned about Finnish gods by exploring the lore of this game is already something special, as I will never even think about Google what Ahti stands for. And the soundtrack. It's been on my playlist for months. It took 13 years for this game to come out. If Alan Wake 1's central character theme was writer's block, I believe that Alan Wake 2 at its core is a story about perfectionism. Alan Wake has been writing his book for 13 years, getting stuck in one loop after another, in an endless cycle of rewrites. For 13 years he couldn't finish his novel, and his story somehow makes me feel that it reflects Remedy's struggle to get this game out to the world. A sequel to an iconic cult classic that couldn't get greenlit due to many external factors. A sequel that had to be restarted many times, much like Alan's novel. It's finally out there. But unfortunately, there is no sight of an end to Alan's story. It's unfortunate that at the moment of this video's recording, the game has not recuperated its budget. I know there is some controversy regarding it being an Epic Store exclusive or no physical release, but this game pushes the video game narrative like no other, and it does deserve to be played by a larger audience. Sadly, it looks like we won't get any definitive ending for Alan's story anytime soon. And looking at the sales, we might have to wait another 13 years for another Alan Wake game.
13?
I hope that's not the case. Maybe it might be different this time and the story won't repeat itself. Hopefully, it's not a loop and it's a spiral.
I sat in the writer's room and wrote a story to project myself through the dark place, to look for a way out. The story had brought me here, brought me nowhere. This story will eat us alive. This story is a monster.